I can hear a pin drop. Maybe we should get Bill to do his Mexican wave again. Why not?
Right then, so now that we have our guest, all the way to sunny Edinburgh, who's going?
It's always good to have such a good pro performer for the warm-up act. Thanks, Bill. Bill, we'll be back later on at the end of the session to close it with a similar style. Well, thank you all very much for coming out this evening. Hopefully you've all managed to grab a little bit of pizza and a beer. And I just want to thank the guys from Safe Networks for those very kind gestures that have kept you all hopefully fed and watered. We put this event on a regular basis. It's a meet-up. We don't always get the size of audience we want, but we always get a good turnout, and we always get good speakers to come along and talk to you. Tonight we have some absolutely great speakers, and we have a standout speaker who I'll introduce shortly, who is hopefully going to take you through what is billed as quite a special subject matter, but expect the unexpected, and that's all I'm going to say at this stage anyway. In the meantime, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Doug Campbell from Safe Networks to come and join me, from MadeSafe to come and join me just to do a quick 5-minute piece or so, if that's all right.
Well, thanks very much for that. I'm not going to hold you up because I know everybody's here for the main event, and that's certainly not me. First of all, I'd like to thank NBN for putting this meetup on. What is interesting to me is, some of you in this room will know, but in these days, NBN run the meetup and it's fantastic. They're doing such a good job of getting people together. I actually started the meetup back in 2014 and stepped back, and these guys took over and it was brilliant. But back in 2014, there was a reason, back in January 2014, we had the very first meetup. And the reason is very much down to this man sitting here, Andreas. So back in the earlier days of Bitcoin, I spent a lot of time, like many of us did, on the internet, dealing with faceless characters and avatars from around the world on Bitcoin Talk or Reddit and all these other places. And I listened to a lot of what Andreas said, and he taught me a lot of things in those early days, absolutely, and continues to do so today. Now, as time has gone on, as I say, I've moved away from the meetup, and the reason for it was to see people with the same passion in the same room, to see people eye to eye and have conversations about things that are hugely important going forwards. And that's exactly what Andreas does. At that very first meetup as well, I met a guy called David Irvin, and he was running a company called MadeSafe. I'd never heard of MadeSafe, and it turned out that this was a spectacular vision of the future. I now work with MadeSafe. I just wanted to touch on who they are, because it's a Scottish company in terms of HQ, and it's something that I think it's important people know about. So at MadeSafe, what we're doing is building the Safe Network. The Safe Network is a decentralized peer-to-peer internet. It's basically a new web. It's one that doesn't rely on centralized servers. I always remember in the early days, Andreas speaking about the fact of centralization being such a damaging concept in many ways. It's like the piñata for hackers, I think, was one of your phrases back in the day. And to this day, that's still where we are. We have an internet that's based on servers, where all of our valuable data, increasingly valuable, is centralized and is therefore at risk. So what we're doing is we're part of a project, the Safe Network. It's open source, a decentralized new internet where individuals can connect to their computers by downloading the software and provide resources, bandwidth, storage, online time, etc. I'm not going to go into the details of it, but I just want to leave you with one thought, really, and that is that the whole ethos of Made Safe and what we're doing in working on building this community with the Safe Network is we're trying to provide privacy, security, and freedom for every single person on the planet. And if that isn't a stretch goal, then I don't know what is. The funny thing is, if we manage it, if we pull this off, and we continue to work at this, we started back in 2006, then that becomes a very real possibility. So all I wanted to say was, if you're interested in the project, if you're interested in something that's going on in Scotland, then please do take a look at safenetwork.tech. Come and grab me afterwards, have a word. The team are here. We've got T-shirts, we've got webcam blockers, we're doing all that, the usual marketing stuff, but ultimately, we're all here for the same purpose. And that's to listen to the man himself, Andreas. So thank you again, Andreas, and thank you to MBM for putting this on. And thanks for coming out tonight. It's great to see so many people.
Thanks, Doug, and thanks again for the pizza and beer. Very much appreciated. So, look, you haven't come here to hear me speak tonight, so I'm not going to say much more than we have a great guest speaker this evening, a best-selling author, a fantastic public speaker, an educator, and someone who spends a considerable amount of time building communities in and around this space. People who join those communities are people like us in this room this evening. So I want you to make the most of this, if not through the Q&A when you get the opportunity, then later on through the networking, because I know that Andreas will be staying around a little bit later on. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over, and I want you to give a very warm welcome to Andreas M.Antonopoulos.
Hi, everyone. There's a little slide there that tells you about my work. I've published 4 books in the space, the most recent one being Mastering Ethereum, which came out in December. The vast majority of my work, if not all of my work, is open source. It's available under Creative Commons licenses. That means it's not only free to read, share, and reuse, but also to mash up and repurpose, translate, play to music, turn into performance art, dance, whatever. And people have done all of the above, including dance and music, which is always surprising to me. This is actually my 4th stop on a 7-city tour of Europe. I'm doing 22 appearances in 7 cities in 28 days. And I was so happy that I could make this stop here in Edinburgh and spend a few days and really enjoy this, this wonderful city and Scotland and get to see it for myself. So this tour is actually sponsored by my Patreon supporters who contribute every month to help me do things like this, to do community events where the expenses are covered, no ticket fee, no sponsors required. Well, pizza and beer sponsors, absolutely, but I can do these things because I'm funded directly by the community who support me on this effort. A little shout out, there's at least half a dozen people here who were at my Patreon happy hour yesterday. Hi, everyone. Hello, hello. Thank you for coming. And thank you to all of those who supported me to be here and to the organizers who made this possible. Thoughts on the Future of Programmable Money is the generic title that I never speak to, that you see at every one of my conferences, and it is a placeholder that allows me to talk about anything I want because I don't actually decide until the day of a talk what I'm going to talk about. My talks are improv, so I want to keep it flexible, so I just have this generic title, Thoughts on the Future of Programmable Money, because you never know when you get up in the morning what might happen on that particular day. So I think you probably all are thinking the same thing. You have a burning question. I felt like I wouldn't be able to do the rest of my speaking tour without first addressing the burning question. And I got bombarded on Twitter today. Everyone has the same basic question, right? And that is, have I tasted haggis? And the answer is no. I'm too scared because I made the mistake of reading how it's made first before tasting it. I've been told you're supposed to do it the other way around because it's a lot less scary. I'm trying to build up the courage. And I've been told that the best way to do this is in a burger. I don't know if that's actually true. No? Okay, there's a big disagreement in the room. Okay, so on the count of 3, all those in favor of haggis burger? Nobody. Okay, haggis for breakfast? Oh, okay. Are there other formulations I should try? Haggis on toast. Very good. How about a corporate-sponsored haggis that is pretending to be an open haggis and was launched this morning? Okay, so let's talk about the elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room is Libra. You probably all heard that this morning Facebook announced their cryptocurrency, Libra. And, you know, whenever the price of Bitcoin goes down, I get calls from friends and family, and they call me up and they go, are you okay? Is everything okay? This time, I actually got a call from a friend's mom to ask me if I'm okay, and the price hasn't even dropped. But just the fact that Facebook launched the cryptocurrency led to the, are you okay? You holding in there? Is everything okay? Do we need to airlift you out of Europe? I'm okay. I'm okay. I actually talked about this probably 3 years ago, that one day we would see this happen. And today's the day, right? So it's now happening. It's happening. But what exactly happened? And what can we talk about today? So what happened was, this morning, Facebook released a white paper. Not a cryptocurrency, not a network, not a currency, not a project, not an application, a white paper. And everybody's freaking out because they wrote a white paper. Now, there's a long road to go between white paper and production network available to 2 billion users wrapped in, you know, candy-colored Farmville interface or whatever they're going to do with it next. But they released the white paper and everybody got really excited. So how many here have read the white paper? Oh, excellent, quite a few. I did a brief skim. I'll be honest with you, I did a brief skim. It's been a busy day. I got a whole bunch of calls from journalists who wanted to talk about it, and I am not ready to talk about it because this is going to take a lot more study. I'm not going to talk too much about the technology today because we don't really know how it's going to play out. But I do want to talk about what changed. And what changed is everything. Everything changed this morning. Something we've been predicting for more than 3 years just happened, and it changes everything. And it changes everything whether or not Facebook is able to get this into production. The mere fact that this white paper was dropped has now set the bar. They dropped the gauntlet. Silicon Valley is coming for banking in a big way. And we predicted this was going to happen. A lot of people in the space predicted this was going to happen. And a lot of people thought it was going to be Amazon first. But turns out it was Facebook, which is much, much worse than anyone had imagined possible. All right, so about the white paper. If you've taken a look, this is a collaboration of about, I think there was about 30 names on the top of the white paper. I have a feeling that the way this was played out within Facebook, some people are saying this was a more than 1 year effort. I have a feeling that what they did was they created this incubator, sandbox, innovation lab environment where they took 30, 40 really bright people, they locked them in the room, and they slid pizzas under the door for a year, and out came a white paper. And what that white paper represents is actually very impressive. It's very impressive in terms of the technology vision. So what they were able to do, these people are very serious about this and very well informed about what we're doing in the cryptocurrency blockchain space. They cherry-picked some of the best features of the best cryptocurrencies, the state-of-the-art technology that existed out there, and then they advanced it a bit, right? And they synthesized it in something that is quite impressive from a technology perspective. It's quite impressive because it's taken ideas like a virtual machine for execution of smart contracts and gas from Ethereum, a Merkle state tree that can be added to Merkle mountain ranges or the Ethereum state tree, an embedded or intrinsic digital currency, similar to Bitcoin, a proof of authority federated network of validators, kind of similar to Ripple or EOS or a few of the other things that are kind of blockchains, but not quite, and a new consensus algorithm that is, well, not exactly new. It's a Byzantine fault-tolerant consensus algorithm, which is not proof of work, but they say they want to move it to proof of stake, so some very interesting stuff there. And they mashed all of this together and created something that is very impressive from a technology perspective. And the reason it's very impressive is because of who did it, not because what was done. Like, if I had released that white paper with 30 collaborators, everybody would have been like, oh, okay, there's another blockchain. But when a company that has 2 billion users does that, people understand that this could have a very, very big impact. So the next thing that happens is we see whether this survives first contact with Facebook corporate. Because at the moment, this is an incubated project. It's idealistic, it's progressive, it's aggressive in its vision, it is focused on being decentralized a bit now, and even more in the future, a bit permissioned now, permissionless in the future, proof of authority now, proof of stake in the future, a very progressive, aggressive vision. And that vision is going to run straight into a whole bunch of MBAs and lawyers at Facebook headquarters who are going to go, whoa. Or maybe not. Let's see. It's going to be really interesting to see how much of this vision survives into deployment. And that's going to determine a lot of what happens next. And then even if it survives into deployment, at some point this is going to potentially become very successful, and a huge moneymaker. And then the MBAs are going to get very excited, right? There's some things in the white paper that are quite surprising. For example, the use of an association to segregate it from Facebook, a promise to not use the profile information on your Facebook account. You have a Facebook account? I sure as hell don't. The information that's in your Facebook profile and use that in collaboration with the currency, that's a no-no, right? And so at the moment, it says that information is not going to be shared. It's not going to be used for surveillance. It's not going to be used for any of these. Oh, 1 second. Sorry. Yes, we're sending you this very important email to notify you of changes to our terms of conditions. Please read the following 600 pages of gibberish to understand how we completely remove due process on any of your privacy. Thank you very much, the Facebook team. Okay, so that email just came to me from the future. It was written by an MBA, and it's going to change all of those promises the moment this becomes successful. You think I'm kidding? Look at what happened to WhatsApp, right? Look at what happened to WhatsApp. The founders of that company that started with the same kind of idealistic vision left, foregoing hundreds of millions of dollars in pays and bonuses, and then said, use Signal. use Signal. Do not use WhatsApp. If you're a dissident, if you're an activist, if you're a political operative, if your communication confidentiality is going to make the difference between you surviving or not, which means if you're any one of the millions of people who marched in Hong Kong this week, yeah, use Signal. Don't use WhatsApp. Will something similar happen? I'm a bit of a cynic. I think that large corporations have a tendency to swallow innovation and rip out all of the disruptive things and spit out something that is neutered and profit-making and exploits their users, because that's their obligation. Their obligation is to shareholders. But we'll see. Maybe it won't be. So that's what happened on the technical front this morning. And now everybody's trying to solve what I call the three-body problem, which is, until now, we were looking at this space as the interaction between two major forces. On the one side, we have government, nation-state money, fiat, as we derisively call it in the crypto space. And on the other side, we have the people's money, right? Open, borderless cryptocurrency that's free for everyone to use. And these two forces are orbiting each other and exerting pressure on each other. Right now, you know, crypto is a tiny little speck of an asteroid, right? And fiat is a nice big planet full of very, very successful life forms. And those life forms are looking up at the sky and going, what's that shiny thing? It seems to be getting bigger. You know, the experience of the dinosaurs. It's like, don't worry, it's pretty. Look at how nice the sunset looks. It keeps getting bigger. Solving the two-body problem and trying to figure out from a political perspective what happens when nation-states and open cryptocurrencies collide is difficult enough. We can't tell because different nations are positioning themselves in different ways. Some are freaked out by it and they ban it outright. China's banned it 1,726 times so far, all ineffectively. India's banned it, well, kind of twice, right? Ecuador was one of the first to ban it, and just like completely. And yet, in many advanced nations, cryptocurrency has actually been thriving. Many of what we call free societies, the idea of banning a form of private currency is constitutionally problematic, right? So both the United States Constitution as well as the United Kingdom's Constitution protect freedom. Oh, wait. Oh, yeah, you don't have one. But anyway, the Magna Carta, let's say, protects freedom of speech, and money is a form of political speech. So that's something that's cherished in free societies. It's not so easy to ban this thing. So there's a lot of this tension. This morning, there was a big discussion on Twitter that I reluctantly got involved in, which was about whether Facebook or whether Facebook's Libra is a cryptocurrency or not. All right? Now let's take a quick poll. All those who say it is a cryptocurrency. All those who say it's not a cryptocurrency. All those who haven't decided yet. That's okay. Well, turns out I don't think that question really makes sense. And the reason it doesn't make sense is because Facebook's Libra is a new thing. It's a corpo currency. It's a corporate digital currency. And we haven't seen corporate digital currencies since the Opium Wars. We haven't seen corporate digital currencies since medieval feudalism and the Medici, right? So how fitting that on the dawn of corporate neo-feudalism, one of the leading neo-feudalist corporate states, super states of corporations, Facebook, the nation of Facebook, the super nation of Facebook, is launching its own currency. And things are going to get very interesting now. They're going to get very interesting for a number of reasons, but the main reason is that we now have a three-point standoff. It is now money of the corporations, money of the people, and money of government. All three will exist. None of them are going away. In fact, there will be more joining. The door's being opened. Facebook is the first of the fangs. The rest of them are bearing their fangs and ready to go. FANGs, if you don't know, is Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, and Google, the billion-dollar tech companies of Silicon Valley. But it's not just them, because it's also Twitter and Uber and Airbnb. The era of internet currencies just opened, and Silicon Valley is coming for the banks in a way that's never happened before. Now, the bankers have been very, very comfortable until now. I went to a conference in Zurich speaking to banking executives in 2014, and I told them, listen, instead of hiring blockchain consultants to tell you how to square the circle and undisrupt the disruption and pretend to do blockchain, you should hire a former music executive from the music industry and ask them, what did it feel like when the internet came for your industry? When did you realize that you couldn't do anything about it? And how did you feel when you started losing your entire industry to Apple? And guess what? The banks had 10 years to figure this shit out. They had 10 years to try to figure out how they're going to handle digital currencies. And just like the music industry should have made a deal with Napster. And instead, they fought it tooth and nail and handed the entire industry to Apple. The banking industry should have made a deal with Bitcoin. It was the cuddly little gecko of cryptocurrencies. And Facebook is a freaking triceratops, and it's coming for their industry. This is going to disrupt a lot of things. The really weird thing about it is that the first to be affected by this are retail banks. Retail banks, not the big bad investment banks that make shady deals to bail out dictators and stuff like that. The banks that actually serve customers. Most of the big investment banks have stopped taking checking and savings customers from the consumer cycle for the last 4 or 5 years. They don't want that. You people don't pay enough, right? Not worthy of banking. But retail banks, the corner bank, the branch where you know the banker, or at least you know them every time you have to go and discuss why your overdraft is ballooning again. But those retail banks that actually serve customers, that have been delivering banking to the unbanked and underbanked, gradually expanding their reach, they're going to get hit hard by this new phenomenon. They're going to get hit hard by Facebook. Because Facebook has not only 2 billion users, but 2 billion users of whom they know all of their preferences, all of the behavior patterns. And they can use that to drop the cost of banking, wrap it in a candy-colored, cute user interface so that every time you make a purchase, the application jumps in and tickles your dopamine receptors a bit and encourages you to do certain things or not do other things, right? And plays with you like a little mouse in a psychology experiment where you can't see that you're in the maze because the walls are too high. This is going to be very, very interesting as it plays out, but also to those of us who've been paying attention to the rise of techno-feudalism, it's terrifying. It's terrifying because Facebook is going to be effective at disrupting regulation in a way the banks have not been able to. It's terrifying because, among other things, Facebook is now going after central banks. And yeah, they have a basket of currencies, and they're going to create some kind of stable coin thing on this basket of currencies. But that stable coin is going to be stable vis-a-vis your local currency that's hyperinflating. I talked about that this morning. The idea, imagine you're in India or Argentina and you're the government and you want to follow an inflationary devaluation policy, and your population has moved 10% of the economy onto Libra and can take their savings and hide them in the hard currency of Facebook. It's not really a hard currency. It doesn't really have a monetary policy, or so they say, but it's harder than the Argentinian peso. It's harder than the Turkish lira. It's harder than the Indian rupee. It's harder than more than 100 currencies around the world. And suddenly, the central banks have lost one of the big levers of power they have over the economy. What are they going to do? Ban Facebook? Shut down 10% of their economy? They're going to try. They're going to try exactly like they've been trying to ban Facebook during protests and coups, dictatorships, revolutions, and they're going to fail. They're going to try to regulate Facebook. Can you imagine the poor regulators who get paid like nothing in their tweed suits, academics from the economics ministry, facing an army of Wall Street lawyers descending on their tiny little country, filling the parking lot of their local airport with 17 Gulf Streams in a row, and saying, let's talk about what we're going to do to your economy. If you didn't realize, what Facebook is planning on doing is consumer retail level SDRs. Who here knows what an SDR is? A few people. Yeah, you get my meaning? The International Monetary Fund is a global institution that's not controlled by governments, that uses contributions of members that they put in a basket of currencies to issue a pseudo-currency called special drawing rights. They're part of the international framework of free-floating exchange rates, and they are the lender of last resort for governments. And they do so in a very predatory manner, where they impose extreme neoliberal austerity on the governments that fall into their clutches, and they asset strip their industries and their water plants and their railroads and their telecommunications companies. Well, guess what? Facebook's going to do that now. Because if you think about what Libra is, it is a special drawing rights pseudo-currency drawn on a basket of currency that is funded directly by consumer activity in the same countries where the government is going to come back and ask them for a loan or try to curtail their activity. This is very serious stuff. We just went post-national. The power to control money that used to be the exclusive prerogative of the states got kicked in the nuts by Bitcoin and decapitated by Libra this morning. The central bank control of a monetary policy ended this morning because more and more technology companies, which currently are worth $1 trillion, once given the ability or taking the ability to mint their own money, will radically transform their business models. We'll use that to generate more money than you can ever imagine. And very, very soon, they will dwarf the GDP of at least a third of the nations on this planet. And when the IMF comes calling, most governments cower in fear, but they have no idea how much worse it's going to be when Facebook comes calling, or Google, or Apple. Maybe even Twitter can take down a few governments. Yeah, it's big enough. Why not? Pretty soon, Uber will be dictating not just to the taxi drivers, but to the local council too. Maybe even the cabinet of ministers. We're looking at a new world in which three forces are going to be competing. Money of the people, money of the state, and money of the corporations. That's a crossroads. We have to make some very careful choices. Now, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful for a number of reasons. I'm hopeful because they're actually going to make a contribution to the technology, whether they want to or not. I'm hopeful because they're going to introduce 1 billion people to the wrong kind of cryptocurrency, just like AOL introduced almost 1 billion people to the wrong kind of internet. And here's where it gets tricky. Because at this point, we need to decide how we differentiate on principles. I've talked about the fundamental principles that I care about in blockchains. Sometimes I call them the 5 pillars. Sometimes I call them the 8 criteria. I lose count all the time. So it's somewhere between 5 and 8. But You should always ask yourself about a system that is trying to take over the foundational technology of money in your world. Is it open? What does open mean? Is it open so that anyone can access it without vetting? Anyone can participate in the network without vetting? Anyone can send a transaction without providing ID? Is it? We don't know yet. We'll see. The white paper is. We'll see what the currency actually does. Is it borderless? I can tell you right now it's not going to be borderless. There is only one borderless global cryptocurrency of any value and meaning today, and that's Bitcoin. And it's maybe as good as the US dollar at being borderless. But Facebook is not going to be in China. I can guarantee you that Libra is not going to launch in China, because they're going to have their own alternative that's going to be launched by WeChat. And it's going to be a wholly owned subsidiary of the People's Republic of China Central Politburo. You know, kind of like Facebook is a wholly owned subsidiary of the NSA. And it's not going to launch in Russia either, because like hell are they going to give up their monetary sovereignty to a dude from Silicon Valley. And it's not going to launch in a bunch of other places where there's a lot of unbanked people who actually need this. So it's not going to be borderless. In fact, quite the opposite. We've now entered the era of Cold War currency wars. The world is about to have an iron curtain drop in currencies like we've never seen before. We're going to see a fundamental split between East and West in the evolution of state-based currencies, corporate-based currencies, and open cryptocurrencies. And of the three, only open cryptocurrencies go everywhere. It's probably not going to be neutral. Neutrality requires the protocol to allow transactions from anyone to anyone for any purpose. And a lot of open cryptocurrencies do that. I very much doubt Libra can do that. Because the moment they start doing that, the subpoenas will start flying. And the most important thing about a subpoena is knowing where to serve it, right? And that's easy. They have an office which accepts service of process, and that's where they're going to send the subpoenas. Where do you send the Bitcoin subpoenas? Aha! You can send them to 127.0.0.1 /dev/null. We will process them immediately. So it's not going to be neutral. It's not going to be sensitive persistent, because large corporations like that are bound by jurisdictional regulations are obliged under law to censor transactions. You cannot send a transaction on a network like that to an Iranian, to a Venezuelan, to a North Korean, or receive one from a Russian or a Chinese citizen without properly vetting who they are, who their parents are, when they were born, where they live, which companies they own, who they're related to. This happens every time you try to do a wire transfer. They're not going to be immutable. They say in the white paper they're immutable. The moment you have a transaction there that funded some abhorrent and inexcusable activity on the open, neutral, borderless network, subpoenas are going to start flying, and the immutable network is going to get muted pretty damn fast. Pretty easy to do when you have a consortium of validators with no cost to modifying past history. Proof of work actually makes it impossible, even if 100% of the validators, the miners, collude, to go back and change the history without expending the same amount of energy, which means that every day that passes, you're looking at an energy cost that increases so fast that very, very quickly, within a day or two, it's unapproachable. It's an undue burden. It's almost impossible, even if you could find and coerce all of the miners. They wouldn't be able to do it. It's not won't, it's can't. And can't is much better than won't. So it's not going to be immutable. It might be auditable and transparent. We don't yet know. But if it is auditable and transparent, it's not going to be private, which means that we are probably only a few years from launch before there's a giant frickin' leak and all of your financial data belong to us. Again, right? Because if it's in the blockchain and it's stored in a transparent manner and you don't have any privacy controls, you know, the kind that criminals use, at least they're smart about using privacy, well, then what's going to happen is all of that information will be leaked. So all of your purchases will now be visible to all of your friends and family. And, you know, we probably all have a very good friend who we've made a pact with that says, look, if I get hit by a bus, I need you to get my laptop. I need you to erase my browsing history. And I need you to shred all of my bank statements before my mom gets to the house. Are we good? You know what I mean? Because financial privacy is a human right. Society doesn't work as a panopticon. We have secrets because we're social animals. We have secrets because that gives us the freedom to express our freaky nature. Because we all differ a bit from the expectations and conformities of society, or at least I fucking hope we do. Because if we don't, what kind of society is that? Where you have to absolutely conform to all of the expectations of your stuck-up neighbors, right? Individuality, expression, freedom is privacy. And so we don't want our financial records blasted to the world, but that's what's going to happen next. So it's going to be auditable and transparent maybe, but not very private. This is not the kind of blockchain that I'm interested in, but more importantly, once again, as I've said many times before, we stand at a fork in the road because on the one hand, we have surveillance money, and on the other hand, we have free, open, and private people's money. And guess what's going to happen with this new currency? The path to cashless societies, the timetable for cashless societies just got accelerated. And cashless societies are nothing to celebrate. Cashless societies are societies without freedom, are societies without democracy, are societies without robustness, fragile societies without the possibility of an exit plan or of a relief valve. They're societies in which one election is the last election. You just have to get it wrong once. You just have to stay at home and say, I don't care about politics. And all of the kooky old people go out and they vote for an orange man or Brexit or some shit like that. And then you're like, what the hell happened? But in a world in which you don't have cash, it's much worse than that. Because now the government, the corporation, the payment processor can decide that you did something bad and turn off your financial future. Make it so that you can't even buy food, let alone pay your rent or your heating. You think this isn't happening? It's happening right now in Hong Kong. It's happening right now in China with the Sesame credit score system. And if you think it's not coming to a country like yours, study up on European history. 1918 through 1945. Fascinating shit. We thought the UK learned that lesson. From what I've been seeing lately, trying to repeat all of those. Great. Sometimes you have to teach the lesson twice. And what are we going to do in the crypto space? We're going to start differentiating. Expect over the next couple of years for a lot of the crypto projects to get very, very focused about what their principles are and how they differentiate now that there's a lot of confusion. Now that we're dealing with the 18-dimensional partial differential equation of a three-body problem. Oh, everything's pulling on everything else and in 6 degrees of freedom. It's very complicated. Who knows what happens next? Look, Facebook went into India. India wants to devalue. Some of the Indian people are going for crypto. Others are being blocked. What happens next? Nobody knows. It's going to get very complicated. So if you're in a crypto project, you need to decide what your principles are. It's interesting because I've been expressing the same consistent principles for the last 7 years. And thank you. The reason is really simple. It takes too much bloody homework to come up with other ideas and try to remember how to be consistent with what I said before if I'm not following what I actually believe in. Some people in our industry noticed that recently. Inconsistencies happen very, very quickly. Some projects within crypto recently faced that kind of fork in the road, and they decided to focus on different principles to try to change the trajectory of some of the projects we care about, right? I've been hearing lately, one of these projects is all about payment systems, very, very inexpensive, cheap payments at the expense of decentralization. And privacy, apparently, to the people who are following this, is only useful for illegal criminal money launderers who are trying to support wash trading and bucket shops. Ooh. Now, if that's the road you want to go down, that light you see is not the light at the end of the tunnel. That's an oncoming Facebook train that already has the principle-less, privacy-less market staked out. Only they already have 2 billion users, lots of money, and lots of technology people who are going to run right over you. If you haven't differentiated based on your principles, or worse, you don't have any principles, or you decided because you recently hired an MBA who's really interested in shareholder return on investment, that the best way to do that would be to shed a few of these silly idealistic principles that these engineer dudes or women have decided to support, then guess what? You start shedding principles, and now you're facing Facebook. And what is Facebook, if not the world's most awesome principle-shedding machine that started with very few and then has developed a mechanism for shedding them faster than you can imagine, with billions of dollars of marketing tickling your dopamine receptors, telling you, don't worry, the future is candy-colored and bright, as long as we're still profitable. They can shed principles faster than you, with more money than you, with better user interfaces than you, and with a bigger user base than you. So if your game is shed principles to make profit, that's a game you're not going to win at. Facebook is going to win that game. And they're going to win it over PayPal, they're going to win it over JP Morgan Chase, and they sure as hell are going to win it over a little ragtag crypto project that said, we don't need privacy, we want to be a fast payment network that collaborates with law enforcement and gives out information for surveillance companies for everyone to share. Figure out what your principles are. Everybody is now going to have to stop, take a breath, and figure out how to differentiate. And it's actually pretty easy. It's really, really easy. If you're going to get into a fight with someone who doesn't know how to hold principles, if you're going to get into a fight with a corporation that is not immoral, because that requires having negative morality, but amoral, which means no moral guidance whatsoever, a lack of any moral compass, because morality doesn't even enter the equation. Morality is not on the spreadsheet. Morality did not enter the ROI equation. If you're going to enter a fight with them, differentiate on the thing they can't compete with. Make yourself the one project, or align yourself with the one project that is truly open, borderless, neutral, censorship-resistant, transparent, auditable, private, immutable. And there are a few of those, I think. I expect the privacy currencies are going to get quite a run, because now suddenly there's a reason to really focus on privacy, and that's because Facebook won't. So, things just got really interesting. As a technologist, I am so excited. I've been jumping up and down all day. I can't wait to see how this plays out, because that's been my lifelong fascination, watching technological systems interact with society and change the world, and watch these developments roll out and see if I can pick up a few clues as to where these things are going, to have that vision. That's been my life's goal. As a technologist, I've been jumping up and down. As a human being, I am horrified. I am horrified at the fact that we are about to open a door to a future that is truly dystopian, that is truly terrifying, and give an amount of power to some of the most ruthless, unaccountable corporations out there to not just fight against government, but in many cases join hand in hand in making sure that while we're exploited by ruthless politicians on one side, we're exploited by ruthless business people on the other. An unholy alliance between capital, corporation, and state is called fascism. Only this isn't your grandpa's fascism. This is a whole new neo-feudal environment that we have never seen before. And a lot of people are going to make the fundamental mistake of thinking that because it doesn't come in a leather uniform designed by a fantastic German designer, Hugo Boss, right, with clashing colors and caricatures parades and screaming into megaphones, and with all of the symbolism of that, it's not fascism. Fascism today comes in a slick user interface, in beautiful colors, accessible 24/7 through a browser at your most convenient location, on your phone 24/7, whether your phone is on or off. And it is part of your life. It's what connects you to grandpa and allows you to share photos with grandpa. That same grandpa who fought Nazis. It's the ultimate irony. We need to be very careful about what we do next. This is deadly serious stuff. Society is not ready for this because we've never been here before. And while I am fascinated to watch, at the same time, I'm deeply troubled. I'm not afraid because I don't think Bitcoin can compete. I'm afraid because I believe that a lot of people don't care. A lot of people will go for the easy, the convenient, the mindless, the repetitive, the seductive, the hypnotizing rhythm of a Facebook feed, and they will lose their freedom and their future. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. We're going to be using the assault microphone. Pull the pin, chuck into the crowd.
Just before you throw that, Bill, I know you're anxious to throw that.
I want to have a go too.
I want to throw the first question your way, and I'm not going to get the thing because I can't catch it and hold the mic at the same time.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. Absolutely fantastic. My question, I suspect, is on the lips of many of the people in this room. And although it might be slightly throwaway, we'd all love to know whose the third hand was today on the back of your shoulder in Edinburgh.
Can I tell? Yeah, it was Annabelle here, my friend, who was hiding behind me. So if you don't know this, I visited Adam Smith's statue in Edinburgh, and I took two silly photos, one in which I'm pointing at Adam Smith and one of my hands is missing. The invisible hand of capitalism, you know, you get it. It's a very, very, very corny joke. And then in the other photo, I'm doing two thumbs up, but there's another hand on my shoulder. And you can't see where it's coming from, and it's really, really spooky. I actually got scared when I saw it myself, and a few people picked it up on Twitter. So thank you, Annabelle, for
properly spooky and well worth having a look at on Twitter. Bill?
All right, shall we do questions with the audience?
Yeah, questions for the audience, please.
Anybody have a question? Raise your hand. We'll get a microphone up to you, or we're going to throw the cube. Speak right into it, close up.
I will speak right into it. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a really fascinating and enjoyable talk. So just a point of clarity, really. I understand the issues around Facebook, privacy, big time. And therefore, you are vehemently saying we should use privacy coins such as Monero. But the point of clarity is, of course, with Bitcoin, we don't really have privacy. Once you kind of link it to a fiat gateway, you can dial back and find out all the transactions that a person has made. I think Mimblewimble is some form of sort of privacy shield. But can you explain how we can have both privacy and Bitcoin?
That's a great question. So for the last 3 years, maybe 4, we've been having a great debate in Bitcoin, in the Bitcoin community, about how do we scale to the next level. And initially in this debate, I think it was probably 2015, I sided with the idea that we needed to increase the block size and address scaling urgently before fees went up. What happened next was really interesting. What happened next was that whole debate descended into chaos. And it quickly went from which technology should we look at first to who should make that decision to who should have the power to make decisions to I have the power to make decisions. No, I have the power to make decisions. Shut up, you just came here. No, I have the power to make decisions. And that power struggle was very illuminating to me. I tried to keep out of it. It was very ugly. One of the interesting things that happened then was I thought that we had a narrow window in which we could get a few critical changes before the protocol at the core of Bitcoin became, as we call it in protocol terms, ossified, meaning turned to bone. Meaning that once you have a protocol in the wild, and that gets embedded in software, and people write libraries, and then you put it into embedded microprocessors and routers and things like that, it gets harder and harder to make changes. Because every time you make a change, you now have to go and change all of the libraries that depend on it, and all of the user interfaces that depend on it, and eventually all of the embedded microcontrollers that are not properly maintained. Think of all of the little Wi-Fi routers that you haven't updated in 17 years. Now, all of those factors lead to ossification. It happens in every protocol. We're stuck with IPv4 even though it can't support the internet. IPv6 has been an ongoing upgrade that was planned to be completed in the mid-90s. I bet all of you are connected on IPv4 devices right now. So that shows what happens with IP. I looked at that and I said, okay, if we have a narrowing window, and this window got a lot narrower once I saw this power struggle, what is the most important thing that we must do in layer 1 and cannot do at any other layer? And the answer is privacy. And so I completely changed my position. I was for scaling on the blockchain immediately, and I changed it 180, and I said, no, we actually need to do scaling on layer 2 and privacy on layer 1. That's currently on the roadmap. Technologies like Schnorr signatures, Taproots, and TapScript are the beginning of that. And then additional technologies that can be added later, all of which go directly out of the SegWit upgrade and allow us to upgrade much more flexibly. For example, confidential transactions that use cryptographic zero-knowledge range proofs called bullet proofs. This is all technical mumbo-jumbo if you're not a computer scientist, but if you're interested in that technology, it's fascinating stuff. This could give us robust privacy. However, we've also learned an important lesson recently, which is ZK Snark technology had a fundamental bug that could create an inflation bug, where people can create coins out of thin air. Bitcoin is a sound money protocol that has a very fixed monetary supply. These two goals now have a bit of a conflict between them. If we go full privacy, maybe we lose the ability to maintain the sound monetary policy. So we're learning as we're going. This is a very difficult decision. The really good news is that we can also do very good privacy on layer 2. So Lightning Network shields transactions from scrutiny because it doesn't advertise them to the whole network. And it's been designed to use the onion routing protocol. Ironically, that's being criticized by some of the people who have taken an alternative path with Bitcoin as supporting only the interests of criminals and money launderers, or Chinese people and Hong Kong people, or people. Next question. Who's got the...
Who's got the cube?
Oh, who's got the cube? Oh, there we go. I mean, for a mostly technical audience, the degree of accuracy in both the throws and the catches is really surprising me. If I was throwing, someone would get injured. Probably someone in addition to myself. Go.
I'd like to ask you, I'm glad you mentioned the Lightning Network.
Yes.
Because you did mention before the questions, you did mention an overlay network with routing payments and stuff, and you mentioned it as a bad thing. And I was first thinking to ask you, like, why are you against the Lightning Network? But now it turns out that you weren't referring to that. What were you referring to, and why do you think that that thing is bad?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand. I was referring to another network?
I don't know, like during your talk, you referred to a layer 2 solution,
No, I wasn't referring to a layer 2 solution. I was referring to some of the forks of Bitcoin that have decided to pursue scalability instead of privacy, and have now doubled down by saying that privacy is actually only for criminals. And I think that's the wrong path. And there's no point in mentioning which they are, because you can figure that out if you're interested in that debate. What I'm really interested in is the principles, right? We're talking about now clarifying principles. What's more important, decentralization and privacy, or scalability and simple payments?
So do you believe, bottom line, that Lightning Network is the way forward for Bitcoin in terms of scaling and maybe privacy?
Absolutely, yes. The Lightning Network is one of the ways we're going to improve both scaling and privacy, but it's not the end. We're going to build on top of that. There's going to be layer 3 networks, and we're going to continue to build optimizations into the base layer. We might even end up doing a block size increase, shock and horror, at the right time for the right reasons, that will then be magnified in terms of its scaling impact by the Lightning Network. This is not a problem that gets solved once. This is a moving target. Scalability and privacy are continuous efforts. Scalability is an arms race between your ability to build infrastructure and scale into the system, and every application developer's desire to use all of that capacity to build Farmville on top of your platform, or some other silly game, and soak up all of the bandwidth, right? This is how it's happened on the internet. The moment you provide more scale, some application developer goes, so we could do 4K VR now. And there goes your capacity of the entire network. And if you fix that, it's going to be fully immersive, tactile 4K VR, or whatever else we'll dream up next. Privacy is also an arms race. It's an arms race between the protocols that are being developed to improve privacy and the intelligence agencies and surveillance capitalism private companies that are feeding them, like weapons manufacturers in this cyber warfare, to violate the privacy of billions of people. And it's time to take sides. Really, it is. It's time to take sides and make careful choices about what you do. Thank you for that question. Let's see if we can throw this again. Okay, and then the next time, maybe we can get a microphone. Who's got a microphone? Do you have one? All right. There's some people over there had some questions. Yes?
Oh, I have a quick question.
Closer to the
weird
cube.
It's tying into the kind of the previous one on Mimblewimble. I wanted to get your thoughts on Green and Beam, the two privacy coins that skyrocketed on the Facebook announcement.
So I think the only thing better than a privacy coin is two privacy coins. Or 3, or 4, or 5, or a whole forest of them. Remember, this is an arms race, right? And using a divergent set of strategies that all try different things in different ways. And they're radically different. The strategy that Monero uses, the strategy that Zcash uses, the strategy that Mimblewimble uses as a protocol, and all of the other privacy enhancements that we see, even Bitcoin's CoinJoin confidential transactions, et cetera, and Lightning Network's layer 2. All of these different strategies address different types of threats. And we're going to have to combine them. We're going to have to find which ones work best and discard the ones that don't work best. This is about experimentation. So at the moment, I have looked at these projects very, very briefly. I'll be honest with you. Too many things going on in this space. So I don't have very strong opinions on Grin or Beam. What I do know is that they're using two very different open source models. They're using two very different community development models. And they're using two very different programming languages and design approaches. Wonderful. Great. That way, we get to try lots of different variables at the same time. So I'm very excited about those. I think we need to have more people working on strong privacy. All right, let's go. Who's got a microphone over here?
Hello. Hi. The last time you were on the Joe Rogan Experience podcast, the price of Bitcoin was $600, I believe. And today it's just over 9,000. I was wondering if you've changed your opinion about whether or not it's a good investment, like a store of value long term, given the price difference. And you've been very outspoken about the fact that you think it's not a good investment.
I think it's a very risky investment, not a good investment. That's not what I'm saying. Listen, I am personally over-invested to a ridiculous amount in crypto. But part of that is because it's my career. If I go and talk to any sensible financial advisor and they look at my allocation of investments, they're going to go, "You're crazy, dude. Do you actually hope to retire or like save anything for the future?" No. My investment strategy is really simple. YOLO, right? I know that wasn't as hip or funny as it sounded in my head, but here's the bottom line. I very much hesitate to advise other people to do things that are risky, and I think there's a great danger in our space to overemphasize the investment side, underestimate the technology impact and the value of education, and also advise other people that this will somehow make them rich. You know, we don't know that. I can tell you this technology will change the world. I know that. I can tell you that this education as a skill set can make you very useful in the future and can give you a great degree of personal satisfaction, a sense of accomplishment, and knowledge that is applicable in a lot of different scenarios, even outside crypto. I can say those things with certainty. So I'll stick to saying those things. You know, there's lots of people in the space who are going to rah-rah you into investing into this stuff. And quite honestly, between 600 and 9,000, how many people got hurt? Right? A lot of people got hurt. They're like, finally, I'm in Bitcoin. It already hit 19,000 to the moon. And a week later, right? We don't want to encourage that kind of behavior. It's not responsible. So I won't do it. All right. Who's got the cube on this side? Go.
Right. So you mentioned there being money for the people, money for the corporates, and then, of course, money for the government. What key components should come together for money for the people to triumph?
So it depends how you define triumph, right? And again, I think of this as a three-body problem, which means that nothing we do within our tiny sphere of influence changes what's happening out there in spheres that we have no influence over. A lot of how the future plays out depends on this very intricate dance of chaotic systems that we don't control. So how does Bitcoin progress? It depends on what happens to the euro. It depends on what happens to the British pound. It depends on what happens to Libra. It depends on what happens to a whole load of other things that we don't know, right? So, and the answer is different in every place in the world. To me, what's more important is how do you define success? I did a talk, it was probably about a year ago in, I believe it was in Ireland, actually, I think it was in Dublin. And the talk was called Measuring Success, or the Measure of Success. And I said, if you think that success can be measured by market capitalization, or daily average users, or world domination, global adoption, complete monopoly, that's not the measure of success. First of all, because if we count by market capitalization, what we're doing is we're basing our assessment of our success on the total amount of dollars we can accumulate in our system, because it is measured in dollars. Guess who has all the dollars? Banks. So if they come into the game big time, at some point they will, and they put a lot of dollars behind it, they're going to win the market cap game, right? And I also predicted that if we count in terms of how many users use it on a daily basis, Facebook's going to win, right? And this was long before they announced they were doing this, more than a year ago. Facebook's going to win. It's going to get 2 billion people to mindlessly follow that path of convenience. So you can't measure success that way. So how do I measure success? What does it take for Bitcoin to win? Does it give you freedom of choice, sovereignty, independence, safety from crisis and turmoil and weird things happening around you? Yes? No? Maybe? Don't know. To me, that's the value. So to me, it does give me those things. So I personally choose to engage in this space because I believe that it empowers me as an individual and it gives me a certain degree of diversification or power of exit or independence from the monetary system. You each have to make that choice. And if it gives lots of people freedom to make that choice, I consider that success. Success is people having the choice, not people exercising the choice. Because people make bad choices all the time. But can we make sure they have the choice? That's my goal in this space. It is making sure enough people understand the basic technology through education in as many languages as possible, reaching as many people as possible around the world so they understand why this matters, what are the principles, how to get started, how to use it, and what it can do in their life. And if the answer is it can't do anything in your life, great, you don't need it. Congratulations, you're part of 5% of the human population that already has it. Has banking and Visa and, you know, institutions that work and a bit of democracy and you're not starving. So that's great, but what about the other 95%? So I'm interested in choice. That's what it's all about, and that's how I measure success, which sounds awfully convenient, because if you take any of the other metrics, we will fail. We will fail, right? There will be more users for Candy Crush money. There will be more users for the money that's mandatory. There will be greater market cap in JP Morgan Chase coin. That's okay. Who's got the microphone?
Okay, so
can we get it down here as well next? Thank you.
To segue from what you've just talked about,
yes.
Do you think that Libra is going to muddy the waters when it comes to people's opinion on cryptocurrencies?
Oh, hell yes. It already has. It already has. That's why my friend's mother called and said, "Are you okay?" Because it's a crypto. It's a blockchain, right? It's going to muddy the waters. It's going to give a lot of people license to say, well, turns out crypto was all about one world government, right? I received a tweet this morning that said, see, I told you it was all about them. You know the triple parenthesis? You know what that means? Right. So it's bringing the worst kind of responses out of people in the world. And great, block and move on, but also educate, right? So how do you differentiate? How do you tell the bullshit from the real? Speak loudly, express your principles, tell the people around you why it's not what they think it is, you know, and that's up to us. Now, the good news is, all we have to do is tell 2 people. That's it. I'll tell 2 people. They'll tell 2 people each. They'll tell 2 people each. 200 degrees of separation later, we've hit 7.5 billion. Exponentials work great. The best part is the most important lessons will be taught by Facebook themselves. They will freeze accounts. They will seize accounts. They will block transactions. They will engage in geopolitics. They will destroy nations. They will impoverish people. They will leak data. And every one of those lessons is going to be hard learned but it's going to explain why we need money that we control that isn't based on surveillance. And you can't teach people to make good choices. They don't want to listen, right? You just have to keep repeating yourself. All right, that was a bit too pessimistic. Let's try an upbeat note. Who's got the cube? You got the cube. Go for it. The cube of death and questions.
Hello, Andreas.
Hello.
I'm very happy that I made it today. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you.
My question is on
A bit closer to the cube.
Sorry.
Yes.
My question is on state chains.
State chains.
Yes. I was just wondering if you could give us your views on how it will scale Bitcoin and will it strengthen the Bitcoin ecosystem? And second part of the question, how do you see the world in 5 years' time?
All right. So that's a bit of a difficult question. By state chains, are you referring to the work published by Rubin recently?
Yes, the second layer.
I haven't read it. So I haven't got an opinion. Okay. I skimmed it. It seemed fascinating. Right. It's a new approach to a layer 2 network.
Yes.
And I was in Korea recently and I met with Rubin. Unfortunately, he sent me a copy of the paper, but I didn't read it in too much detail. So I have homework to do. Can I get back to you on that? That's the kind of Q&A I'm going to handle for sure in my next Q&A. In terms of where things go in... Okay, let me rephrase that a tiny bit. There's no need to only have one layer 2 network. In fact, when we say layer 2 network, that sounds like it's one network running one protocol, right? So the internet doesn't have one layer 2. It has dozens. It has dozens of layer 2s and dozens of layer 3s and thousands of layer 7s. So the protocol stacks can exist in such a way that you can have multiple different protocols coexisting on the same base layer. So we can have a Lightning-based layer 2. We can have an L2-based layer 2 rather than the original Poon, Dryja formulation of payment channels. We can have a state chain layer 2. And all of these can coexist. They can connect to a Plasma layer 2 that's connecting to Ethereum, for example. There may be dozens of these. And within each one of these layer 2s, like the Lightning Network, there may be multiple different routing protocols operating in parallel. There may be layers within, like the way VPNs work inside of the internet, right? So you have private networks, you have public networks, you have intranets, and they all coexist in this network of networks. We're also going to have layer 3 networks. There's already some ideas with what are called channel factories, which are multi-party, multi-sig channels. So instead of a 2 of 2 channel that connects 2 parties, imagine a 5 of 5 channel that is like a mesh network between 5 large hubs. We're also going to have a variety of different topologies. So people say, will the Lightning Network be a completely flat mesh topology, or will it be a hub and spoke topology? It'll be both. It'll be both, just like the internet. We will have highly privatized, centralized hub and spokes that kind of look like the Facebook of Lightning, right? And then we're going to have mesh networks around underneath. We're going to have virtual private networks hiding. We're going to have dark nets within the Lightning Network, just like we do on the internet. This is truly the internet of money, and it will have all of this variety within it. It's not uniform. In fact, it's dangerous to make it uniform. So state chains, yes, please. Can I have some of those? As well as payment channels and layer 2 and layer 3 and VPNs and channel factories and all of the other solutions mixed together. This is going to get very, very complex very, very fast. The difference is that all of that complexity happens at an engineering level. So we've got 2 parallel efforts. At the infrastructure layer, enormous complexity is going to develop over the next decade in order to achieve all of the divergent goals of scalability and privacy and things like that, just like it does on the internet. If you understand how internet routing works, it is incredibly complex. People do PhDs on all of the different layers and how they connect and how to improve them, and it's constantly changing, right? And it's not uniform at all. That's one effort. At the application layer, we're going to try and build user interfaces that hide all of that. When you click send on an email, you have no idea how it's routed. That's how it should be. When you click send in a wallet, you shouldn't know if your recipient is getting paid in Bitcoin or Ether or Monero. You shouldn't know if it's going over layer 2 or layer 3 network. You shouldn't know what their address is. You shouldn't know how you're connecting to them. What you should know is, intuitively, does the experience reflect what's actually happening? Does it tell you how fast it's going to get there? Do you know how much you sent? Did you do the secure thing just by doing the intuitive thing? And if we succeed on these two very divergent goals, massive complexity in the infrastructure, completely hidden at the user interface level so that it's nicely wrapped in an intuitive package, then we succeed. So yes, state chains. Absolutely. Let's do those two. Yes.
Where, in your opinion, do smart contract platforms like Ethereum and so on fit into the future of programmable money?
Where do smart contract platforms like Ethereum fit into the future of programmable money? In my opinion, smart contract platforms represent a fundamental different set of trade-offs than sound money. If you talk to Bitcoin maximalists, they say, we can do smart contracts too. And if you talk to Ethereum maximalists, they say, we can do sound money too. They're both wrong, in my opinion. I think there are some fundamental design trade-offs. The fundamental design trade-offs that we have to go down in order to make a robust, nation-state resistant, censorship-resistant network, monetarily sound network with strong privacy, closes all of the doors that take us to smart contracts. And vice versa. All of the flexibility you need to do smart contracts undermines the security principles in such a way that you can't do the things that sound money and strong privacy does. Maybe you can do both. I don't think so. I think there are always some fundamental trade-offs. Now, we may discover that some of these are not fundamental trade-offs. We may discover that some of these are just an illusion of trade-off, right? And we see that often with different types of networks. And we may discover that others are really fundamental. That's an exploratory process. I think that we need a variety of approaches to exist within a broad ecosystem. Preferably, we need to make it so that the choices between which platform you're using for which job are made by a layer below your user interface. So that the idea of committing to one cryptocurrency or one platform to do everything for you is nonsensical. It's like saying, I will make phone calls from here to the United States, but only over AT&T. You don't make that choice. You call a number, it gets routed through some provider, right? I'm going to connect to the website that I want to, but only over Google routers or level 3 routers. You don't make that choice. You shouldn't make that choice because it doesn't matter. What matters is, if what you're trying to do is achieve sound money, can your wallet guide you in such a way that you're getting that for the application you're using? And if you want to do something that involves, I don't know, a complicated escrow or an asset-backed stablecoin, then it uses a smart contract. And maybe it takes a bit from your sound money balance and dynamically converts it to another currency in a few milliseconds and uses it to build up a stablecoin platform so you can engage in that, and then switches back the change, and you didn't even notice it happened. That's the world I envision. Now, that may be completely off, but I don't see these projects as competing because I believe that each aspect of specialization leads them further away from the other path. Every door you open is a door you didn't open. And the evolutionary example I use, if you're interested in this, it's a talk I've done called The Lion and the Shark. And it talks about evolving into different ecological niches. Both are apex predators, but in a fundamental different ecology. And they cannot compete, because everything that makes the lion a king of the land makes it useless in the water. And everything that makes the shark a king of the sea makes it useless on land. So imagine a cage match between a lion and a shark. Who wins? It depends entirely, not on how strong the lion is or if you got the best or weakest shark. It depends on whether the cage is in water or not. That's it. The entire thing depends on which ecology you're in. If you're in the shark's ecology, the shark always wins over the strongest lion, right? And if you're on land, the lion always wins. And you can't make a lion shark, right? It doesn't make sense. And this is just a way to express this with a ridiculous visual, right? But the underlying mechanism is the same for both cryptocurrencies and biological evolution. For directed evolution and random evolution by natural selection, it's the same process. And this process is this. Specialization is a winning strategy. Specialization allows optimization and best use of resources. Survival of the fittest does not mean the strongest. It means the one that fits best within the ecological niche that it's actually trying to occupy. The sound money ecological niche has already been occupied by Bitcoin. In order to occupy that niche, it can't occupy another. So I think that that aspect of specialization exists in cryptocurrencies. It's an optimization. It makes a lot of sense. You can't have both, and that's okay. All right, how many more?
So can I make a suggestion? I'm hoping you're going to stay around for a little bit longer in the meet and greet.
Yes.
Could I make a suggestion? If there are further questions, people try and catch up with you afterwards. Is that okay?
Well, if that's the case, before we shut it down, let me take one more.
Sure.
Because,
take one more question.
it's too bad to like just cut it off without
of
telling people that this question has to be the best one of the evening.
No pressure.
Now watch people throw the cube away.
Not at me.
You want to go for it?
No, I regret calling for it now.
Okay,
anyway, I hope it lives up to it. So you mentioned two things about immutability and anonymity, privacy on the blockchain, on Bitcoin. Can we hope for backwards privacy when true anonymity protocols come into Bitcoin that unlink or kind of hide the link they have with fiat currency right now? And the second part is, you mentioned something about immutability of the whole chain being impossible to counterfeit or change because of the sheer volume of work with proof of work. Can we maintain proof of work with the current energy demands that it needs? Or do we need to move to proof of stake and sacrifice this immutability in some sense?
Two great questions. Nice job. Okay, so question number one, which I've already forgot because I went to the immutability one. The question number one was...
Anonymity, backwards anonymity.
Anonymity, yes. We can't. We can't fix the bad operational security of the past. This is actually a critical problem. And one of the reasons it's a critical problem and has to do with how do we choose to use anonymity-enhancing technology or privacy-enhancing technology? If the privacy-enhancing technology is voluntary and seldom used, then the fact that you use it is itself a red flag, right? Does that make sense? Right. So, for example, let's say I want to use a defensive technology, purely for defense, body armor, right? Okay, so if everybody's wearing body armor, no problem. If I'm the only person wearing body armor and walk into a bank, people are going to make assumptions about what I'm about to do. Right? Do you see what I mean? If I'm the only person wearing a motorcycle helmet, body armor, and walk into a bank, they're going to make very strong assumptions about what I'm about to do. If you're the only person on the network using CoinJoin, the fact that you're using CoinJoin says that you're doing something for which privacy is a very big premium. And of course, that could be something completely benign or even desirable in a moral society, like you're a whistleblower or you're a political activist in a totalitarian regime. Or it could be something nefarious, right? You're a stalker or a domestic abuser and you're trying to buy a gun on the dark market to shoot your spouse, like something horrible. The bottom line is we don't know, but the very fact that you raise that red flag is dangerous. So if we do privacy, the best way to do privacy is in a way that it is always on by default and you don't know if you're using it or not. The good model is the difference between PGP and SSL. PGP fails because not enough people use it. SSL succeeds because you don't know you're using it, and there's no way to turn it off. Like if you wanted to turn your browser so that it doesn't do SSL, you're like, no, I'm not going to the secure site. I'm going to type in HTTP. And you type in HTTP, and the website redirects you to the SSL site. You're like, oh, come on, do I really have to do privacy? Yes, you do, right? So on by default, for everyone, is a very powerful privacy model. One of the reasons that Taproot, TapScript, and Schnorr signatures were combined in one proposal is because Taproot masquerades every transaction as possibly being a script or possibly being a simple pay-to-public key. And you can't tell what it is. And in many cases, you can execute the script as a pay-to-public key, like, for example, closing a Lightning channel, and nobody can tell the difference. And that's really powerful. Because if we then lead to adopting that, then that privacy is used everywhere by everyone. But here's the problem. If you went and you bought Bitcoin from a place where you showed ID, that transaction was inextricably linked to all future transactions originating from that address, and through statistical clustering, it points right back at you. So if you went and bought something, that's not yet legal in Scotland, if you know what I mean,
Sure I don't.
then that can come back and bite you in the future, right? So the problem with backwards privacy is you can't bridge that gap. So what we're going to have to do is, one, make sure we fix this before a lot of people join the technology so that new entrants come in with full privacy. The other thing is a change in the culture around Bitcoin. I've been saying for years now that the best way to get crypto is not to buy it because it's not an investment. It's to earn it through your labor. I get paid in crypto. I don't show ID. It doesn't go through an exchange. It's not tied to my identity. When I get paid privately by other people directly in crypto, and then I pay my staff directly in crypto, it doesn't get converted to fiat. Fiat is not part of the biggest chunk of my business. More than 50% of my business happens in crypto only, crypto in, crypto out. No identity connected to it. Perfectly legal where I live at the moment, right? That means I'm not touching the exchange surveillance endpoints. And that gives me a much higher degree of privacy. All right, so the next question was immutability. Can we sustain proof of work, or do we move to proof of stake? If you try to move to proof of stake, only a few will follow you. And so these types of fundamental principled decisions no longer result in A or B. They result in A and B through the mechanism of a fork, which means there will always be a proof of work network as long as I'm running it, right? I have a choice as one individual to continue to run it. If there's 2 of us, better. If there's 2 million of us, great. If it's just me in my basement, I'm the last diehard supporter of proof of work. I've been in that position before. I've been called weird. It's okay by me. The interesting thing about crypto is that you don't have to make that choice. And in fact, in the absence of overwhelming support to move to something new, proof of work preserves the status quo, strongly preserves the status quo by forcing a fork, which means we're not going to leave proof of work. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen at all. It's never going to happen. It might become very expensive to run. And in that case, people will turn off their equipment, the difficulty will go down, and then it will no longer be too expensive to run. It's a dynamic algorithm. How much energy are we using right now? We're using exactly the right amount of energy. How do I know? Because the market has told me so. There are 2 ways to make decisions in this world. One is to aggregate all of the information available to the market through the power of price. And the other one is to elect someone to make the decision for you. We already have systems where you can elect someone to make the decision for you. This is a market-based system. And as long as it exists as a market-based system, it will aggregate all of the profit and loss decisions made by all of the participating miners and say, how much is the right amount of proof of work? The current amount of proof of work is the right amount of proof of work, by definition, because the market said so. Great question to end on. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andreas.
Please tell me there's more beer.
There is more beer. There is definitely more beer. Just check in. Yeah, there is more beer. But just before we go to the beer, I could probably arrange another beer for you, actually. I know we've got a lot to thank Edinburgh Napier for the fantastic location this evening. It's a great venue to come and have any meeting in. But hopefully you all agree this is a great place to come and listen to Andreas. So thanks very much to Edinburgh Napier. I know, Bill, you want to say a few words?
Today really has been the birthday of my city. We had Bruce Nair in the morning here, and we have you in the afternoon.
What a letdown.
Yeah. It started so well.
I mean, Bruce is amazing, so I'm a fanboy.
Well, I think the city showed the world how to act in the age of enlightenment, and I think we have the opportunities to show the world that there is a new way of working. And I think academia is the home for this type of debate. Mm-hmm. So I think the more that we can spread the word, we can educate, that we learn. And what is so inspiring is that you have such a strong technical underpinning, but you can see the bigger picture. I think there's too many people who see the bigger picture, such as our politicians, unfortunately, and don't understand the technology at all. So I think if our politicians talk to you and Bruce a little bit more, then we would have a better society that we can actually build. So we've learned things today. FANG with a double A, which is pretty good. Amazon and Apple was something that I learned, and that we have the money of the government, the people and corporations. But I think our history goes back 40 years to 1976, when the great Whitfield Diffie published a fairly ordinary-looking paper saying kind of new directions. And what he did was build a new world around public key encryption. Rivest, Shamir, Alderman then formalized that, and RSA is still around. If you look at the original paper, they thought it took 77 years to crack their algorithm. It takes less than 1 second to crack what they did then. But RSA is still around, and the core of public key encryption, it gives us the possibilities for the future. And then the CryptoPunks came along, because we were having a kind of bad time with the banks at one time. We have one bank in Scotland that didn't do so well and had a big problem. And it's taken them all that time to get citizens back on their side. So it was May, Hughes, and Gilmore, the CryptoPunks, that saw a new world. And that new world was built around public key encryption. And they really laid that foundation. I'd like to quote a couple of things. We lost Timothy May this year, which was unfortunate. But he said a lot of amazing things. He said, these developments will alter completely the nature of government regulation, the ability to tax and control economic interactions, and the ability to keep information secret, and will even alter the nature of trust and reputation. And I think everything that you said fits into that. And it says, just as technology of printing altered and reduced the power of medieval guilds, who's that? And the social power structure, so will cryptologic methods fundamentally alter the nature of corporations and of government interference in economic transactions. And I think the picture that you painted was exactly what Tim actually said.
I read that when I was 16. It changed my life.
It changed your life.
Yep.
And we lost Hal Finney recently.
Yep.
Hal Finney, if you look at the original emails, he was all over it. Why? Because he loved cryptography. I've never been in a subject that I've loved so much and I adored. I apologise for understanding what Mimblewimble actually means.
I don't either.
That's good. But people like Aldi Shamir, who couldn't get into the US because of a visa. He couldn't get into his own conference this year in the US. He couldn't get there because of a visa. He has worked endlessly in privacy over the years, and a lot of what we have is built into here. David Cham really built the whole infrastructure about anonymized transactions. So the world that we're really building is changing, and our society is changing. If you don't get involved in the debate, then it's going to go the wrong way, I think, as Andreas has talked about. We're lucky that on the 4th of September, we're going to have a blockchain and cryptography conference for all the geeks and for people who are interested in blockchain. So we hopefully will see you back here on the 4th of September and to be part of the community. It's going to be part of the cyber revolution. So we're going to start in Edinburgh, because everything starts in Edinburgh, and we're going to go around the world. Apart from it, I won't say anything about that. Do you know that what Bruce told us today, that we're wrong to leave the EU? I'm only quoting what he said this morning. I'm not adding anything. But he kind of said we were wrong to leave the EU. So I thought that was quite interesting. So the cyber revolution will take us around the world, and we'll be honoured, wherever you are on the planet, to really be the keynote speaker for our cyber revolution, because we want everybody to start a debate and for everybody to start to work together. And we want to build bridges, and we want to knock down walls. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was inspirational. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. There is now time for networking. I understand there are more refreshments downstairs. Is that okay? We're still... Yeah? Good stuff. So please do hang around. Take the opportunity to catch up with Andreas. Any more pressing questions, please feel free to add them. It's downstairs.
Oh, wow.
I met you at London.
I remember, yes. How are you? You did a painting.
I did, and
we got some good photos, though.
It was great, yeah.
Thank you so much.
So I just wanted to say thanks to that. And also on the back, there is this picture here of this guy in this NASA Portrait Gallery. If you scan that, you've been in the NASA Portrait Gallery since October